Hello and welcome to Chapter 9 on Human Development. We are going to look at development, child development, adolescence, adulthood and aging, and health and wellness. Development is the pattern of continuity and change in human capabilities that occurs throughout one's life. We have growth and then we start to decline. Another aspect that developmental psychology looks at is our behavior as a child and how that plays out as an adult. So for example, Albert Einstein was a child who had temper tantrums and raged as a child. However, he grew up to change the world. Each developmental period is marked with important physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional changes that are intricately interwoven. Physical processes involve changes in a person's biological nature. People go through hormonal changes with puberty and menopause. We go through height and weight changes and motor skill changes. Socio-emotional processes involve changes in an individual's relationships with other people, changes in emotions, and changes in personality. Cognitive processes involve an individual's thoughts, intelligence, and language. In terms of developmental psychology and research, a lot of times cross-sectional studies are used, and they show changes that occur with age. A cohort is a generational group of people that are living within the same time period. Issues with these types of studies include cohort effects or differences that stem from the individuals not because of their age, but due to the historical or social context of that specific time period. For example, people who were growing up during the time of 9/11, that will be a historical context that will affect them. However, with newer generations, that will not be part of their lifetime. Longitudinal studies assess the same participants multiple times over a lengthy period of time to look at them across the years. With the whole nature-nurture debate, nature refers to an organism's biological inheritance, whereas nurture refers to an organism's environmental experiences. The relationship between nature and nurture influences both our mind and behavior. It's not one or the other, but together they both produce a person's temperament, height, weight, etc. A person's genotype is their genetic heritage. It may not reflect their phenotype, which is their observable characteristics. The environment can play a role even in genetic expression. So for example, phenylketonuria, PKU, is a condition caused by two recessive genes, and it results in the inability to metabolize the amino acid phenylalanine, a major component of the artificial sweetener aspartame. It's used in many soft drinks and other products. In the past, the genotype for PKU led to a specific phenotype, which was irreversible brain damage, developmental disabilities, and seizures. However, now they've found that as long as one sticks to a diet that is low in phenylalanine, the phenotypic characteristics can be avoided. The environmental precautions can change the phenotype associated with this genotype. With each genotype, there's a wide range of phenotypes that can be present. So looking at the developer's role in development, some psychologists believe that an individual can develop beyond what their heritage or environment predict. An individual's development involves seeking the optimal experiences in life. Optimal experiences involve developing life themes that include activities, social relationships, and life goals. There have been ongoing debate on whether early or late experiences are more important in determining aspects of later life. Lifespan development stressed that researchers have given too little attention to adult development and aging. They argue that although early experiences contribute powerfully to the development of an individual, they are not necessarily more important or influential than later experiences. Resilience is a key concept that helps developmental psychologists understand the role of negative early life experiences on later development. It refers to a person's ability to recover from or adapt to difficult times. Resilient children have been found to have several advantages. 1, strong intellectual functioning, and 2, close supportive relationships with parents or other adults that help them overcome their disadvantages. So childhood development includes the time from conception through the elementary school years. Prenatal development starts with the germinal period, which occurs during the first 2 weeks after conception. After an egg has been fertilized, it contains 23 chromosomes from the mother and 23 chromosomes from the father. The embryonic period occurs during the 3rd through 8th week. In the 3rd week, the neural tubes start to form. In around 21 days, eyes begin to appear. 24 days, the cells of the heart start to differentiate, and by the 4th week, there are arms and legs that start to emerge. The 5th through 8th weeks, the heart begins beating, and the face starts to form. The fetal period occurs during 2 through 9 months of age. Organs can survive on their own outside of the womb. The mother can feel the fetus moving for the first time, and at about 6 months, the eyes and eyelids are completely formed. There's a grasping reflex, and irregular breathing begins. So there are threats to the fetus that people have to be aware of. Teratogens are agents that cause birth defects. They can be chemicals ingested by the mother or an illness such as rubella. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorders are a cluster of abnormalities and problems that appear in offspring of mothers who drink heavy amounts of alcohol during their pregnancy. Some abnormalities include a small head, facial characteristics such as wide-spaced eyes, a flattened nose, and undeveloped upper lip, as well as defective limbs and heart defects. Children with fetal alcohol syndrome are often below average in intelligence. The timing and exposure of teratogens is important based on the body part or organ that's developing at the time of exposure. They are vulnerable at that time. So as you can see on the screen also, nicotine and sexually transmitted infections are also problems that can cause issues with a developing fetus. So genetic characteristics can buffer or worsen the effects of teratogens. In terms of STIs, such as gonorrhea, syphilis, and HIV, they can impact the development of a fetus, increase the chance of a stillbirth, eye infections, blindness, and increase risk of preterm birth. Gonorrhea and some other STIs can be transferred to the baby during delivery. Others, such as syphilis and HIV, can infect the fetus in the womb. A preterm infant is one that is born prior to 37 weeks after conception and may be at risk for developmental disabilities. It's always difficult to predict. If a prenatal baby grows up in poverty, they're more likely to have problems. And as adults report poorer health and well-being, and research shows that massage can help improve developmental outcomes for preterm infants. So during the period of infancy from 18 to 24 months, there's more physical development during any other period of your lifetime. Newborns come into the world with many reflexes such as swallowing, holding their breath underwater, coughing, blinking, and yawning. Many reflexes are crucial for survival. So you have rooting, which is when you stroke their cheek, they turn towards that direction and open their mouth to feed. They have gripping. If you place something in their palm on their hand, they will grasp it and hold on to it. They have toe curling, that if you stroke the inner or outer sole of their foot, they will either curl their toes or they will spread them out. The moral or startle reflex. This is when a baby, if they're startled, they throw their head back and arms and legs out and cry. The gallant reflex is when you stroke an infant's lower back next to the spinal cord. They curve toward the side that was stroked and look like a fencer when doing so. Some of the reflexes persist through life, like coughing, blinking, and yawning, but others disappear with neurological development, like the grasping, rooting, or the startle reflex. Within the 12 months, babies will sit up, stand, climb, and even sometimes begin to walk. In the second year of life, they begin running and climbing. Researchers now realize that motor development is not determined by nature or nurture alone. Experiences play a role in motor development. When infants are motivated to do something, they may create a new motor behavior. This behavior is the result of many factors, such as developing the nervous system, the body's physical properties and movement possibilities, and the goal the infant has in reaching for something, and the environmental support they have for the skill. Babies use both motor and perceptual skills to maintain balance, to reach for objects, and to move across surfaces. Babies also learn about things in the world by watching others. There was an experiment in which they put sticky mittens on children for 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks and had them grasp and manipulate objects. The children with the sticky mittens were able to manipulate objects much earlier than the control group. That shows how the environment can also influence skill building. The preferential looking technique involves showing an infant 2 separate objects. If the infant shows a preference for one object over the other, it is inferred that the infant can tell the difference between the 2 objects. The use of sophisticated eye tracking equipment also has advanced the measurement of infant perceptual development. So through the age of 2, synaptic connections are massively overproduced. After that age, gradual synaptic pruning begins and the number of synapses are pruned down to the adult level. It is presumed that genetically programmed overproduction coupled with experientially directed pruning allows the brain to develop a vast neural network precisely tuned to the environment the individual is raised in. At birth, we have 100 billion neurons with minimal connections between them. In the first 2 years, dendrites of neurons branch out and the neurons become far more interconnected. In the brain, myelination of the axons begins prenatally and continues after birth. In some children up to 5 to 6 years of age. This process is of encasing axons with fat cells. Research has shown that a child's brain goes through dramatic anatomical changes between the ages of 3 and 15. Synaptic connections increase dramatically, producing more connections than may be used. What isn't used is pruned away. The most rapid growth in the brain is in the frontal lobe, which occurs between the ages of 3 and 6 years of age. planning, organizing new actions, and maintaining attention are in this area. Here you can see at birth, 1 month, 3 months, and 15 months, the explosion of neural networking. On this chart, you can see the progress of the visual cortex, auditory cortex, and prefrontal cortex, which has the reasoning and self-regulation in terms from birth to adulthood, and how that peaks at 1 to 3 years, and then it starts declining. Cognitive development refers to how intelligence, thought, and language processes change as a person grows. Jean Piaget believed that children actively construct their cognitive world as they develop and grow throughout the various stages. Schemas are expressed as behaviors or skills that children can exercise in relation to objects or situations. In adulthood, schemas represent more complex expectations and beliefs about the world. Processes in development of the schemas includes assimilation, which occurs when a person incorporates new information into their existing knowledge, and accommodation, which occurs when a person adjusts his or her schema to new information they're receiving. In Piaget's theory, there are 4 stages. Each involves a qualitatively different way of making sense of the world than the stage before it. The sensory motor stage is birth to 2 years, and in this stage, children coordinate their sensory experiences with their motor actions. So they're seeing and hearing with their physical actions. A crucial accomplishment in this stage is the obtaining of object permanence. Object permanence is that when you remove something from the side of the child, they don't think it just completely is gone. They understand it just was removed, that it still exists. And once they have that ability, they can think about future events. In the pre-operational stage, which is from age 2 to 7, this is where psychological inquiry begins. They can think critically about object permanence. They are able to represent their world through words, images, and drawings. It's more symbolic than sensory motor thought. They cannot, however, perform operations, meaning they see representations as not reversible. So, for example, a child in this stage would not understand that the liquid in a tall, thin beaker could have the same amount of liquid as a short, wide beaker. A child in the pre-operational stage demonstrates egocentrism, meaning they cannot differentiate between their perspective and another person's perspective. So this is the mine stage. Everything is mine. And if you've had a 2-year-old, you'll understand that. So the concrete operational stage is from 7 years to 11. This is where intuitive reasoning is replaced with logical reasoning. They are able to classify things into sets and subsets and consider their interrelations, and the concept of conservation is grasped. This means that they can tell that just because liquid has been poured into a taller, thin container, it does not contain more liquid than it was in the shorter, wider container. Formal operational stage, which is 11 to 15 years. In this stage, they are able to think more abstractly, idealistically, and logically than in the previous stage. They can think in hypothetical possibilities, which is considered idealistic thinking. Adolescents can think more like a scientist, where they devise plans to solve problems. Piaget called this type of thought hypothetical deductive reasoning. So evaluating Piaget's theory, researchers have since discovered that some of Piaget's thoughts are not exactly true. Infants as young as 4 months old know that objects still exist, even when they can no longer see them. There's also overestimation of cognitive acumen of adolescents and adults. Many adolescents and adults do not reason as logically as Piaget proposed. So the nativist approach emphasizes that infants possess primitive expectancies about events and objects in the world and are less dependent upon experiences as Piaget originally proposed. Balagueron has documented infants as young as 3 months old, knowing that objects continue to exist when hidden. Findings such as these suggest that psychologists must expand their appreciation for perceptual and cognitive tools that are available to infants with very little experience. Comparatively, the empiricist approach would emphasize the role of experience in the world as the central driver of cognitive and perceptual development. Vygotsky's sociocultural cognitive theory takes a very different approach. Piaget did not believe that culture and environment played a role in children's cognitive development. However, research have discovered that acquiring conservational skills depends to some extent on whether or not their culture provides relevant practice. Vygotsky recognized that cognitive development is very much an interpersonal process that happens in a cultural context. Scaffolding is a process by which a child's cognitive abilities are built higher and higher in a framework for mastery. Adults spur cognitive development by interacting with the child in a way that is just above the level of sophistication for that child, so that they continually master higher and higher steps. The information processing theory of development focuses on how individuals encode information, manipulate it, and monitor it, and create strategies of handling it. Instead of seeing cognitive development as stages, this approach focuses on specific cognitive processes such as memory. Working memory is linked to many aspects of child development. Children with better working memory are more advanced in reading comprehension, math skills, and problem solving. Executive function refers to higher order complex cognitive processes such as thinking, planning, problem solving, and it manages one's ability to engage in goal-directed behaviors. Parents and teachers play an important role in the development of executive functioning. So temperament is described as a child's behavioral style and characteristic way of responding. As children grow up, they're socialized by others, and also they socialize people around them. The easy child usually is in a positive mood and establishes regular daily routines in infancy. The difficult child reacts negatively, cries a lot, and takes part in irregular daily routines. The difficult child is also not accepting of new experiences. The slow to warm up child has a low activity level, is somewhat negative, shows low adaptability, and demonstrates a low intensity of mood. Other researchers include elements such as self-regulation, inhibition, and positive and negative affectivity as part of temperament. Infant attachment refers to the close emotional bond between the child and caregiver. Some researchers believe that its close attachment to the caregiver during the first year of life sets up an important foundation later in life. Bowlby theorized that the infant and mother instinctively form an attachment. The Harlow study was conducted at a time when science generally viewed attachment as a behavior that existed essentially because of reinforcement, the reinforcement being that they were fed by caregivers. Harry Harlow conducted some historical research that investigated the concept of attachment, and he separated infant monkeys from their mothers. Some of the monkeys were provided with a wire mother that was wrapped in a warm fuzzy cloth. The other monkeys were provided with a cold wire mother. Each of the wire mothers were equipped with a bottle of milk for feeding the infant monkeys. The infant monkeys spent more time with the warm fuzzy cloth mother than the cold mother, even if the cold mother was the only one providing milk. From Bowlby's vantage point, infants' experiences lay the groundwork for expectations about what human relationships will be like and set the stage for future relationships. Mary Ainsworth devised the strange situation test to measure attachment of infants. In this experiment, she would have caregivers leave an infant in a room with a stranger and then return. They would observe the infant's reaction and determine their type of attachment. There are 3 types. The secure attachment is the infant would become upset when the mother left, but quickly calm down when they returned. This type of infant will use their caregiver as a secure base at which to explore the environment. So as long as the mother's in the room, they will explore, but they know that they can see their mother. She's within their eyesight. For insecure attachment, there are 2 types, avoidant and ambivalent. Avoidant, the child doesn't even notice the mother left the room. And ambivalent, they exhibit intense distress when the mother leaves and then rages at her when she returns as if angry at her for leaving them. Critics of the attachment theory argue that cultural differences are not accounted for, and in some cultures, infants show an attachment to many people and not just to the primary caregiver. So Erik Erikson has a theory of socio-emotional development. His lifespan development theory states that there are 8 psychosocial stages of development. According to his theory, the first 4 stages occur during childhood, and the last 4 occur during adolescence and adulthood. Erikson's developmental tasks are represented by 2 possible outcomes. Each stage has a greater strength and competence or a greater weakness or vulnerability. The trust versus mistrust stage occurs during the first 1.5 years of life. Trust develops when the baby's basic needs of comfort, food, and warmth are met. If these needs are not met, the result is mistrust. The autonomy versus shame and doubt stage occurs from 18 months through 3 years of age. Children seek independence through autonomy. If autonomy is not met, then the child feels shame and doubt. The initiative versus guilt stage occurs between 3 and 5 years of age. Children in this stage seek out responsibility and initiative. If initiative is not met, then feelings of guilt ensue. The industry versus inferiority stage occurs from age 6 through puberty. Children achieve industry by mastering knowledge and intellectual skills. If they do not achieve industry, they may feel inferior. Erikson believed that development is a lifelong process. He also believed that adolescents are seeking a way to find out who they are and where they fit in the world. Some researchers believe that his focus on single concepts within each stage leaves out other important developmental tasks. Developmental psychology also looks at parenting. Authoritative parenting is restrictive. These types of parents demand the child follow the directions as they value hard work and effort. The authoritarian parent controls the child with little verbal exchange. Children of authoritarian parents tend to not initiate activity. They have poor communication skills and often compare themselves to others. Authoritative parenting encourages children to be independent, but they still have limits set on their behavior. Verbal exchange is encouraged, and the parents are warm and nurturing. These children tend to be socially competent, self-reliant, and socially responsible. Neglectful parenting has no involvement in the child's life. Children of neglectful parents tend to feel as though other aspects of their parents' lives are more important. These children tend to be less socially competent, handle independence poorly, and show poor self-control. Permissive parenting demonstrates involvement in the children's lives, but they tend to set no limits. The parents let the children do what they want. The children of indulgent parents often show poor social competence, often fail to show respect for others, they expect to get their own way, and they have difficulty controlling their behavior. Moral development proceeds. Morality shifts from being externally controlled to internally controlled. Morality is the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors regarding the principles and values that guide what a person should do. KOHLBERG developed a theory that has 3 levels. In the pre-conventional stage, our behavior is guided by punishments and rewards that come from the external world. In the conventional level, it's more abiding by standards that are set by our parents and the law. And in the post-conventional level, our behavior is guided by principles that are accepted by the community, or even more abstract principles that are seen as the betterment for all humanity. So one critique of KOHLBERG'S theory is that moral reasoning does not necessarily mean moral behavior. A person may know the difference between right and wrong, but still perform the wrong behavior. Another critique of KOHLBERG'S theory, which is called the justice perspective, is that it does not adequately reflect interpersonal relationships and the concern for others, which is more reflective in the care perspective of moral development. So moral foundation research takes into consideration the concepts of care, fairness, loyalty, and authority and purity as perspectives that are considered when rendering a moral judgment. Pro-social behavior is behavior that's intended to benefit others, and research shows that supportive monitoring by the parents results in less aggression and increased helping and comforting of others and children. Research has also shown that by 3 months of age, infants are showing some early signs of a conscience. Different parenting strategies are associated with morality in children. Parents who are warm and supportive rather than harsh, reasoning with their child during discipline, and also helping their child learn to take others' perspectives, involve them in decision-making, and also model the moral behavioral and thinking, help to increase the development of morality. So in adolescence, it is between the ages of 10 and 12 through 18 to 21, depending on what theory you're looking at. Adolescence is a time of evaluation, decision-making, and commitment as young people try to find their place in the world. Variations in ethnicity, culture, history, gender, socioeconomic status, and lifestyle characterize their trajectories. So at puberty, which is marked by rapid skeletal and sexual maturation that occurs throughout adolescence, females are marked by their first menstrual period, but in boys there is no set marker for when puberty begins. There's an increase in height and weight, and it occurs 2 years earlier in girls than boys. The male hormone testosterone and androgen is associated with the development of the genitals and increased height and a voice change. The female hormone called estradiol, which is an estrogen, is associated with the development of breast, the uterus, and skeletal development. Some researchers believe that hormonal changes account for at least some of the emotional ups and downs that adolescents go through. In one study, they found that boys who matured faster were more successful and less likely to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes than boys who did not mature as quickly. So researchers have discovered that the early development of the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, and the later development of the prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making center of the brain, account for some of the problems that adolescents face. Because the amygdala develops faster and earlier than the prefrontal cortex, adolescents are very emotional and cannot or do not know how to control their emotions. Biological changes in the brain are linked with experiences. So for instance, one study of adolescents found that resisting peer pressure was correlated with prefrontal cortex thickening and more brain connections. Adolescents enter the formal operational stage at around 11 to 15 years of age. Adolescent egocentrism is the belief of the adolescent that others are overly concerned with them as well as they are about themselves, and that the adolescent is unique and invincible. Adolescents believe that others are watching them more than they actually are. They also believe that no one else, especially their parents, could possibly understand what they're going through. The most dangerous behavior is the thought of invincibility. This thought that nothing could happen to them leads to such risky behaviors as drag racing, having unprotected sex, drug use, suicide attempts, drinking alcohol, and smoking cigarettes. In Erikson's theory of socio-emotional development, identity versus identity confusion stage, it is when adolescents are trying to figure out who they are and where they're going in life. They do not successfully explore these identities, they will feel confused about who they are. Erikson believed that there is a gap between leaving the security of childhood and the autonomy of adulthood. Adolescents fall into this gap when they are trying to figure out who they are. If they are not successful in figuring out who they are, they suffer identity confusion, will either withdraw and isolate themselves or lose themselves in a crowd. In Marsh's theory of identity status refers to a person's position in the development of identity. Marsh's view consists of two main dimensions, exploration and commitment. Exploration refers to a person's investigating various options for a career and personal values, and commitment involves making a decision about which path to follow and making an investment in attaining that identity. So with identity diffusion, there's no exploration or commitment. In identity foreclosure, there's commitment without exploration. And in identity moratorium, there's exploration without commitment. And identity achievement is both commitment after exploration. Many adolescents from minority groups go through a stage where they become aware of how others in society evaluate their ethnic group. Some minority adolescents face the challenges of biculturalism or multiculturalism, meaning they have trouble identifying with their ethnic group and the ethnic identity of the majority culture. Both parents and peers play a strong role in the adolescent's development, especially helping adolescents explore and answer central questions of identity. Monitoring of adolescents may include supervising their choice of social settings, activities, and friends, as well as his or her academic efforts. However, it's important for parents to be flexible and match their involvement with their son or daughter's life. This kind of flexible approach has been termed vigilant care. This idea captures the ways that parents must allow adolescents to explore while keeping an eye out for warning signs of problems. Adolescents spend more time with peers than they did during childhood. Positive peer relation is to have one or more close friends. Researchers have found that hanging out with delinquent peers in adolescence can be a strong predictor of substance abuse, delinquent behavior, and depression. So development continues through adulthood. Developmental psychologists identify 3 stages of adulthood. Early adulthood, which occurs in the 20s and 30s, middle adulthood in the 40s and 50s, and late adulthood, which is in the 60s and until death. Emerging adulthood is the transition from adolescence to adulthood. There are key features according to Arnett. The first feature is identity exploration, especially in terms of love and work. During this time, many changes in identity take place. The second feature is instability, where there is a sense of instability in work, love, and education. And the third feature is self-focused. During this time, a person feels no obligation to social situations. They have little in the way of duties and commitment to others. The fourth feature is feeling in between, where the person doesn't feel they are an adolescent, but they also don't feel like a full-fledged adult either. The fifth feature is the age of possibilities. At this point, adults are optimistic about their future and have an opportunity to direct their lives in a positive direction. Physical changes in early adulthood also occur. Most adults reach their physical peak development in their 20s, and after this time, many physical skills begin to decline. Perceptual abilities also decline with strength and speed, which is noticeable in the 30s. Because many young adults are in great physical health, they don't heed the warnings to stop bad eating habits, heavy drinking, and cigarette smoking. Physical changes in middle and late adulthood include that by the time you're 40 and 50, your skin begins to wrinkle and sag. Age spots begin to appear and hair becomes thinner. Individuals start to lose height and gain weight. Because of the noticeable physical changes that occur, people become health conscious in their 40s. Heart disease, cancer, and weight gain are the 3 greatest health concerns. Women also go through menopause, which is when their period stops, in middle adulthood. Estrogen declines, bringing about uncomfortable symptoms such as hot flashes, nausea, fatigue, and rapid heartbeat. Older adults can navigate the physical changes associated with age through the process of changing their goals and developing new ways to engage in desired activities. This is known as selective optimism with compensation. Centenarians are individuals who live to 100 years and beyond. Cellular clock theory developed by Leonard Hayflick is based on the fact that cells can divide a maximum of 100 times and that as a person ages, their cells become less capable of dividing. Cells extracted from adults in their 50s and 70s divided fewer than 100 times. Telomeres protect the tips of the chromosomes. As a cell divides, these telomeres reduce and then the cell can no longer reproduce. Some researchers have examined genetic manipulation of telomerase activers and determined that they might influence levels of telomerase. Meditation has also been found to enhance telomerase activity. The free radical theory states that people age because unstable oxygen molecules develop in their cells. These unstable molecules are called free radicals. They destroy DNA and other cellular structures. Free radicals are actually important for the body's survival. Foods rich in antioxidants help your immune system attack bacteria with free radicals. Hormonal stress theory argues that aging in the body's hormonal system lowers resistance to stress and increases the likelihood of disease. While the discovery that brain cells continue to multiply on to late adulthood astounded scientists who had previously agreed that neurogenesis ended during childhood, and in fact mostly was completed before birth. Astonishment has led to a tendency to exaggerate the significance of this finding. The old view was not at all that far off the mark. The evidence strongly suggests that for most of the brain, if neurons die, they are not replaced by fresh neurons. Instead, existing neighboring neurons that have been around since birth do their best to take over the function of the deceased neurons. Nonetheless, whether medical science can artificially change all that is another matter altogether. The brain has a greater capacity for renewal than the aging body. Researchers suggest that adult brains generate new cells, though it's limited to the hippocampus and the olfactory bulb. Keeping the brain active and energized slows down the effects of aging. Lateralization is one type of adaptation that occurs in adulthood. It is where information is not as specialized in one hemisphere of the brain or the other, but that the information is more widely found when older adults are using all areas of the brain. Piaget's beliefs propose that formal operational thought is the highest level of thinking and that there's no new changes in this area in adulthood. He believed that an adult thinks no more logically than an adolescent. The only difference, according to Piaget, is that an adult has more knowledge in a specific area than an adolescent. Some critics of Piaget believe that the idealism in adolescence thinking is replaced in adulthood by more pragmatic and realistic thinking. Cognition in middle adulthood, according to a recent study, found that the highest level of intellectual ability in vocabulary, verbal memory, inductive reasoning, and spatial orientation occurs in middle adulthood. Middle adulthood is the period when many people reach their peak for their range of intellectual task. In terms of speed of processing and most areas of memory, younger adults perform better than older adults. Wisdom, which is expert knowledge about practical aspects of life, increases with age. This occurs because of the life experiences that an older adult has gained. Some factors can lessen the decline in cognitive ability among older adults, such as memory-enhancing techniques and physical fitness. When older adults continue to increase their engagement in cognitive and physical activities, they are better able to maintain their cognitive functioning in late adulthood. So looking at ERIKSON'S last three stages. The first is intimacy versus isolation. During the stage of early adulthood, people face a crisis involving intimacy versus isolation. They struggle with forming intimate relationships with others, or they become socially isolated. Men and women are waiting longer to marry in the last few decades, which may impact the overall successes of marriage. One of the principles for a successful marriage is nurturing fondness and admiration, meaning that the partners praise each other. A second principle of successful marriage is turning toward each other as friends. A third principle of successful marriage is giving up some power. Neither partner should feel as though they have to be in power. A fourth principle is solving conflicts together. During middle adulthood, adults also become concerned with generativity versus stagnation, the feeling that one has made a contribution to the next generation. The feeling is associated with positive psychological well-being. One way of making a lasting contribution is through the effects of positive parenting and being engaged in your child's life. However, how parenthood relates to the well-being of parents is still a debate in psychology. In the last stage, integrity versus despair, we're looking back through the years of development. People who are aging evaluate their lives, seeking meaning, and enter into the integrity versus despair stage of development. In this stage, they look back on their lives and see what they have accomplished. If they feel though they have accomplished a lot and did the things they set out to do, then they will have a sense of integrity. However, if they look back on earlier stages negatively, then they will experience despair. Research on adult socioeconomic development has found that the more active and involved older people are, the more satisfied they are and the more likely they are to be healthy. Older individuals are more comfortable and more likely to spend time with people they know well, such as close friends and family members. Socio-emotional selectivity theory suggests that older adults are aware of their limited time on Earth and seek out meaningful, positive relationships to maximize their experiences. They are more selective in social relationships as a result. The capacity to regulate emotions and maximize positive experiences appears to be a central feature of aging. A positive relationship exists between attitude and longevity, such that people who believe that life was hopeful and worthwhile lived on the average 7.5 years longer than those with negative attitudes about aging. Adult development is more likely to be a conscious process and therefore a truer mark of an individual's accomplishments. Individuals grow by dealing with life's difficulties. When something bad happens, such as an illness or death, the individual has the opportunity to change, to develop and mature. Accommodation occurs when existing cognitive structures are modified or new structures are developed. Life themes are described as a person's efforts to cultivate meaningful, optimal experiences. These motivations are demonstrated by individuals who use their success for the betterment of the world. Development is an ongoing process that we humans retain throughout life as we enter the opportunities to grow, change, and make a mark in the world in which we live in. So just to review, hopefully you can explain how psychologists think about development, describe children's development from prenatal stages, describe children's development from adolescence, discuss adult development and the positive dimensions of aging, and discuss important factors in the successful adult psychological development.